Welcome back to the channel. We're playing 20 questions with.
Tom Otto from Goldspot Pens.
All right, let's get into the questions.
Let's
When
do
I
it.
say fountain pen, what pen do you think of?
I'm going to take the Family Feud approach and just imagine that I'm trying to get the number one answer for this and say Mont Blanc Meisterstück 149.
All right, how did you get into pens?
I originally was more into art, especially when I was younger. So I had played around with like dip pens and like bottle of Higgins ink, doing comic book pages and stuff like that. So it was kind of like my first initiation to it. And I've always appreciated going through like an office supply run, back to school shopping and stuff. So I've always liked the idea of like finding the good instruments and things that help me do work and help me be creative. And then eventually I was looking for a more creative job after college. I happened to see this ad on Craigslist of all places for a place that was looking for an online retailer that was looking to make a catalog. I was like, well, I have experience in college of making uh like a PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, like InDesign, like doing working through design programs and stuff like that. It's like I can make them a catalog, sure. And what do they sell? It was like one of the things they said was like watches, but then they said pens. So I was like, okay, that's why I started working at Goldspot back like 17 years ago. And from that point, I was then introduced to all the different pens and was like, oh, well, what's fountain pens? It's like, well, it was kind of like that thing that you used when you were dipping and doing comic art, but not necessarily like splattering ink all over the place. And like, you don't have to dip it all the time. The ink is in the pen. And so this was just like a revelation of like, oh my God, I don't have to dip the nib anymore and I could just write with it and the ink is in the pen. This is great. And there's a whole bunch of different nib sizes and I don't have to worry about ink splattering all over the page if I go the wrong direction. So that, yeah, that was my first introduction. That's when I just started to tumble down the rabbit hole ever since.
I love that it was Craigslist.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you think of all the places with like Indeed and Glassdoor and
Yeah,
Monster. It was just like I was just looking at Craigslist. I was like, who needs help around here in the area where I could get just something that was basic experience? And it's like I've been here ever since. So
that's fantastic. What was your
mhm.
first pen?
My first pen that I still own to this day is Lamy Safari, and I got it with the extra fine nib because I was afraid of ink at that time, and I just needed something that was going to be more like the gel pens and the ballpoint pens I was used to. I wasn't like, oh my god, I don't think I could handle the wide wetness of like a medium or broad nib. I have to go extra fine to start with, and now it's just gotten out of hand ever since then. But Lamy Safari was my first.
Yeah, fair enough. What's your current daily driver?
Well, for that, I do have a selection on hand of pens that I've been using in my rotation. Today's particular pen, though, is Mont Blanc 146, of which has Bokumundo's brilliant Urushi lacquering and Rodin on the ends and everything. So I sent this to her, I think it was like last year or so, and it just makes the boring plainness of a black pen into something extraordinary. So it's one of my favorites I love to use, and I'm using it today.
What do you have it inked with?
I have it inked with Sailor Manyo, the fifth anniversary of, oh, what's that one called? It is Ishi, which is Pebble.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's to go with the color because I love matching colors with pens, ink colors with pens. So if it's got green in it, I feel okay with putting a green ink, or if it has like an orange red in it, I'll feel. So this one I could put a lot of different types of ink in it and feel that it works together.
Yeah, I do the same thing. What's your current favorite ink?
My current favorite, and it's a long time favorite, is Tasha, and I'm probably butchering the name of it, but Saibi Midori. It's that rust green one that just has an interesting color shift as you lay it on the
Hmm.
paper, and it's got sheen, and it's just such a brilliantly deep ink that is just so unique. And we yet to really find anything that just has that similar vibe to it.
Out of, I think, your episode 17 that I filmed, You are the third or fourth person who
I think
said
I've
that
gotten a
ink.
lot of people into that ink because
And
I just raved about it
somebody
so
was
much.
so upset that I hadn't tried it that they spent an absurd amount to ship me a sample file from the States.
Wow,
And so now
that
I've
is
tried it.
yes. And what do you think of it?
Oh, I like it. I'm not a huge fan of green inks, but
Mhm.
I haven't got it in a pen yet. Um,
Okay.
but it's probably going to be in a pen in September when I do my next inked video.
It toes the line of both I think green and blue,
Yeah,
and it just I think it's just such I love the ones that are kind of in between different colors. It's not exactly in one color family or another, but it kind of could occupy either characteristic.
yeah. No, it's a super fun color.
Mhm.
What's your favorite brand?
My favorite brand, and I would be a huge fanboy of, is Leonardo Officina Italiana. It's like one of my favorites that I have a couple pens of. One of which is my Grail, which is made out of celluloid. This is the Brooks Primary Manipulation One and the MCG 2.0, and it is just I just love the quality of Leonardo's pens. I love the creativity, the beauty of the materials that they use, and the consistent quality, and the fact also that prior to when they've really entered the market, there were so many Italian brands that would have very, very expensive price points. So, like Aurora or Montegrappa. If you want to get a piston filling fountain pen that had Italian acrylic and had all the characteristics of a Leonardo, you'd be paying almost like double of what Leonardo charges for their pens.
Yeah,
And I mean, the prices have kind of evened out as it's gone along because they've been really kind of in the market since about 20 like 17, I want to say. But they so the prices have come up quite a bit, but still I feel like for what it's worth and the value that they put into it, it still is like an amazing, amazing value proposition for what you're getting out of it.
I've tested one. I don't own one yet.
You gotta, if there's one thing that you have to do out of this conversation, you gotta try a little bit more with the Leonardo. That's my favorite.
More people need to send me pens.
Okay,
More people need to put me on their PR list
I
so
got
that
you.
I can have more stuff in my
Hmm.
collection. Vintage or modern?
Well, I went through a vintage phase a few years ago. I did buy up some Parker backs, which I'm very, very fond of. I still have one in my collection. I did get like a few older Watermans, a Conklin, and since then, basically have released those back into the wild and have only have just the one Parker back because I do prefer modern in the regard that like I feel like the vintage are a little too precious for me to be using on an everyday basis, and that's why I use my pens all the time. And like I'm even nervous about my Parker back because I use a lot of different inks, and I'm always afraid of using something that's not going to agree with the diaphragm that's in there, and then end up like eroding the the filling mechanism.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I kind of feel like they're just a little too like delicate and precious for me to really be interested in keeping more of those in my collection. So I'll favor modern over that.
Only Mont Blanc goes in my vintage, but you also have a rule about pens coming into your collection and pens going out that I
Yes, yes.
appreciate.
So like that 10 pen collection at some point had more vintage than it had modern, and then once the new bright and shinies had been coming out, and I just started to be like, oh well, I don't really use this one so much because I'm afraid, I'm gonna with like a lever fill system that I'm gonna end up ruining the sack inside because of the inks that I use, and I just started to kind of feel that they just were not the things that I would use consistently, so they ended up getting replaced.
Fair enough. Do you swatch all your inks?
I do. I have a ridiculous amount of coloring swatch cards that I have yet to really. I really want. Yeah, like mine is just a disaster on my desk. Not on this desk, but it's at the office. But at my desk at home, I have rings and rings, and I've overstuffed the rings, so I will combine multiple rings into one.
Yeah,
And
these are combined cola ring dippers, but I highly recommend
yes.
the whole mini command hook thing because it's great. They always have a spot to go to,
Hmm.
and they don't sit on my desk anymore.
I want to do more something that I don't know what's in the binders that you got up there, but I want to do something that's like a binder
Oh,
solution where I like
these are all
put them in.
watercolor swatches.
Yeah,
These are all for these palettes.
okay. Yeah, that's what kind of I want to do is I want to take the cards and almost like do like a card collection with them, like if you were doing baseball cards and put them in like sleeves and then have them displayed that way. But I think the coloring cards are kind of a little bit oddly shaped, but other
I,
than they're not like part of like the standard
I
size. I still
wonder
have
if
yet to
they
really find
fit
them.
in business card sleeves for binders.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I might have to get something like that, and then maybe just like use a paper cutter and just trim off like the very edge that has the hole punch in it, just
Mhm.
to make it so it fits. But I have yet to. So that's a whole project. I'm gonna have to do it,
Yeah.
dedicate like at least
You,
like a half a day to it with all the samples that I have. So,
yeah, you gotta commit. And
hmm,
honestly, that's like you gotta find a good movie or TV show when you commit to a project
yeah,
like that.
like listen to an audiobook while I'm doing it or something. I gotcha.
Do you daily drive the same pen and ink combination, or do you switch it up?
Oh no, no, no! It's always switched up. I'm in the throes of a 30 inks 30 days challenge, which is something I commonly do when a month with 30 days comes up. So I kind of somewhat half cheat in the regards that like you could do it where let's say you just do the one pen and one ink combination and that's the only pen that you write with for the whole entire day.
Yeah.
I've done that before and that's just a lot of like cleaning and inking and cleaning and inking every single day. So what I have been doing is I have been inking a new pen every day. But then let's say for example I have all my five of my pens are already inked and have the last 5 days of ink
Yeah.
in them. So today, what I'll probably do is I'll pick like the two that are the oldest ones that probably have the least amount of ink in them, and then I will empty them, wash them out, and then have the last 2 days of the month is going to finish out this weekend. So then I'll put in new ink on those. But like they're always constantly being swapped out, and I love the other thing, which I don't know if you're very familiar with, but I've made an ink journal um, like a notebook using endless the regalia paper
Okay.
and that is the way that I also keep track of like which ink is in which pen, which nib size, and like that way I could kind of get a handle on like which combinations work better and
Well,
which don't work so well.
you've also just answered question number 10 with that answer. Um, but I'm now going to ask a question about 30-day inks in 30 days. When you fill the pens for them, because
Hmm.
I'm always in awe when I see people do that challenge, I think it would drive me mental. Um,
Hmm.
do you fully ink your pens or do you partially
No,
fill
just I just do a little bit.
them? Okay.
So for example, I mean these are probably the hardest ones to work with. Well, other than that, and like a vac filler, is because yes, they're all piston fillers. So they're supposed to fill up with a decent amount of ink. But what I will do is I will only kind of turn the piston, and once I see the ink lift out of the sample vial, and if the pen has an ink window, I'll see like a little bit of ink just kind of spurt up in there, then I know I have pretty much all that I need for like the next couple of days. Because then if I completely fill the thing up, I don't want to have to waste all of that.
Yeah.
Or what I'll also do too is if I did fill it up decently, I will then take the pen. I will just empty it back out into the sample vial, like when I'm done with it, and I'll wash it out if I
Yeah.
didn't use it. But for example, for like this, since we're at the end of the month, and I still have a few pens inked. I'll just write it out until, like, because then I'll just ink two new pens for the 29th and 30th and then just write out, like, I won't clean them all out. I'll just continue using them until they dry. I love writing pens dry. That's my thing, is that if I could write it and to the very last moment when, like, no more ink comes out, it's like, I've done my job, got it to the last drop, and I'll go and clean it out. But yeah, it is a very cumbersome prospect to like have to keep inking and cleaning pens, but it's kind of a part of the fun is just really exploring all the different colors and combinations that you can make, and then going through your sample collection and rediscovering some of the colors that maybe you bought a sample set and you didn't get to try all the different colors, and now you want to go back in and sample some of the things that you might have lost over before.
Yeah. So you answered question number 10, which was, do you have swatches of your nibs in a way that you can go through them? And
Yep,
clearly
using the
you,
ink journal. Yep.
yeah, which I think makes you the third person who's done this that does that. Most people look at me like I'm insane when I ask that question.
Like, you mean to tell me that you keep track of these things? I also do it too. Is that I like trying different sample papers so that I will basically I can make like a currently inked in the back of a notebook or something, just so that I have like a different comparison of what that ink looks like on a different type of paper.
Yeah. What's a pen you wish you could see in person?
I had so there was a video series a while back, not a while back. I think it was kind of a similar type of
Okay.
question. That was it the one that was on YouTube,
Was it eight
the
pen questions?
eight pen
Yeah.
questions, and I this still holds true right now. Is that I had answered this before, but it's the conid pen, just any conid pen, because they're just always so kind of elusive. I've never really seen one in the flesh, and I just want to know what the big deal with all of it is, and that's something that just has always eluded me. So definitely the conid.
What's your grail currently?
I feel that I am at I'm at a point in the collecting or in like just overall in the pen hobby where I just feel totally satisfied. And unless something gets introduced that it just blows my mind, like I have no want for anything currently. I'm just like I'm totally set. Like I don't have any things that are just like, oh, I wish I had this one or this one got away or whatever. This like I'm set. Like I'm good. No grails. I have my grails. They're all good. So
Fair enough. Honestly. What's a pen you would recommend to a beginner?
I the way that I started with Alami Safari is not a bad start, but I kind of think about like, well, in terms of like beginner, where are they at, and try to meet them there, because sometimes people have certain reservations about like, oh, okay, well, I don't like a pen that has like a molded grip, or like I hold it differently, so or I'm afraid I might lose it and it's too expensive for me. So there's a lot of things that go into it that I try to like steer people towards something, because there's like always like a batch of different pens that I would suggest, and one of them definitely is the Lamy Safari. But I don't think it works necessarily for like everybody in general. So sometimes, like if it's just the lowest cost scenario, I would throw like a Pilot Varsity or a Platinum Preppy, just to just to see how they like the experience of like a nib on paper and the liquid ink flow. But if they're looking for something that's a little bit more like I want to actually own this pen and really enjoy it for a long time, then and be interested in cleaning it and maintaining it, is I would say a Lamy Safari.
Okay. What's an ink you would recommend to a beginner?
Ink, I saw Hemingway Jones had recommended, and I actually have this bottle on my desk, is Waterman Serenity Blue. And this is the ink that I use to test a lot of pens. So customers ask, like, could you test this pen before it ships out? Or if I'm just testing a nib, like a variety of nibs, and want to see the nib size comparison, I will use Serenity Blue, because it's a beautiful color and it has like some sheening to it. It's a beautiful saturated blue, and it cleans well out of every pen. Like it doesn't give me any problems when it comes to like trying to get it out of the
I believe it was described by Hemingway Jones and I, and in the comments as the blue that won't make you cry.
pen. The blue, yeah, the blue that won't give you any problems. It's just such a great, and it's also great for just to introduce yourself to the world of pens, and the bottle itself is functional in that you can
Yeah,
tip it to the facets to get the ink deeper in the bottle. So at this point now, the ink level is at that area where I do have to like rest it on the desk at one of the sides. So it's just a nice like standby. It's always going to be in style, I think.
no, it's like it's just a practical ink color.
Hmm.
What advice do you have for somebody wanting to try out fountain pens who may be a bit intimidated by them?
Yeah. So this one, when I was listening to Hemingway's conversation, is that there are certain roadblocks that people have, and I've talked to a lot of customers over the years, especially new people who have just been introduced into the realm of fountain pens, and usually there's several roadblocks that are in place. Uh, and one of them is definitely the aspect of like actually caring for a pen, which they originally thought like pens in the general conception of the idea of pens is that they're just cheap things that you just use once to sign a receipt for something and it just goes into the dustbin. It's like that's it. It's just gone. And you kind of have to change their perception about it, being like, hey, there's beauty and there's something to be appreciated in this simple object that's not just there for like a one time, like I'm just signing my name or just jotting something down. That this is an instrument that you could use forever if you wanted to. And that I think is really one of the key aspects to say like you don't have to buy a whole package of big pens. Like you could just buy this one pen, refill it forever and ever, and you'd be totally set. But then they also have the issues like, well, I tend to lose a lot of things, or I tend to not treat my things well. So they're constantly losing like their AirPods or they're breaking their phone screens and stuff. It's like I'm going to have no shot at being able to write with use a fountain pen and then have it not break on me and like leak ink everywhere. So there's some issues that you kind of have to like talk to people through and be like, well, maybe we could then go with something that's a little bit sturdier, like a Lamy Safari. It's made of ABS plastic, made for Legos, and you've stepped on a Lego before. You know that Legos don't snap underneath your feet; they end up snapping your feet before they snap under your feet. So it's like you kind of have to like meet them where they are in their hesitations and say, you know what, there's something for that. You could find something that will work for you.
Yeah. What filling mechanism do you think is most interesting, regardless of if you like to use it or not?
Kind of connected to the conid is the bulk filler. I was interested in, I know it's not quite like a vacuum filler and it's not quite like a piston, but it's like something of it's just a mystery to me. So I want to see what that's like.
What nib size do you prefer to write with?
I'd say nowadays it's definitely like a fine, flexible nib because I'm the person that drives manual stick shift. I like the manual ability to vary the amount of flexibility so that you could go from like writing normal, small type of write and then go with the nice big header, big swirly Spencerian calligraphy on top if you'd like to.
Right? Is there a style of nib you love but would never actually use?
For this, I would say that it's just a normal fine point. I don't even like extra fine, but I like fine point, but I just don't use fine point because it doesn't provide enough like line on the paper to see the ink.
I only use fines with dark colors of ink.
Okay, yeah, because you especially the lighter saturated ones, it doesn't even really do anything for it.
There's nothing there.
Hmm.
Do you always use the same paper? If so, what paper?
I use for my bullet journal. This is an endless, and it has 68 GSM paper, which I know that they're not making anymore in the normal regular Tomo River.
Okay.
But I also have two. I have it here too. Is This is a Wonderland. It's got the 52 GSM, but with the Sanzen Tomoe River paper, and I feel like it's just as good. It's even more crinkly. You can maybe hear the crinkles of this.
You
Is
can hear the crinkles.
It's very crinkly and light. I like that. But I also have two is the ink journal, which has the 80 GSM Regalia paper, which is very thick paper, and it's got a decent amount of tooth to it, so it's very different than the Tomoe River stuff. But then I also use Rhodia as well. So I any of the writing videos you usually see on Goldspot, or also in I tend to carry like a smaller notebook,
Okay.
and that might be Rhodia 80 GSM paper, just to kind of switch things up and have something different.
Right. What is your least favorite ink/ink color family?
I would say so for ink color family, I don't I don't tend to go towards blacks because black I just feel like is mostly just black. If you want to use black, it's more of like a necessity out of like business appropriate office supply that you need to use black for. And there's just not a lot of variation. I love seeing like variation in color and shading and sheen and like the the multi-tonal, multi-chromatic type of inks, and just the black color family just really doesn't have a lot of that. Like there's some exceptions where there's some that have shimmer and some that have like a more richer sheen and like are darker. I could appreciate those, but in general, like when I'm saying like, okay, let me go shop for, I want to get a new different color of ink, or looking to do an exclusive ink, the black is not the first one I'm looking at, because like there's just really not a lot of variety there.
I own a single black, and it's waterproof.
That's what they're good for.
Yeah, they're good when you need a waterproof ink.
Hmm.
That's what black is good for. So thanks for playing 20 questions.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry if I ended up beating your time for as long as we were talking. I don't know if we did or not, but
I
I,
don't
I
think
think
you
it might
did.
be close. I didn't
It's
mean to. I'm
it's
sorry.
fine.